news if it's a kind of statement that can neither be true or false. You couldn't scientifically verify it. And in fact, if it's a narrative is an interpretation of facts. So facts might be true or false. Well, that's what a fact is, right? But an interpretation of a fact, like, for example, the theory of evolution. If it's a theory, it's not a fact, it's a narrative interpreting facts. And by definition, theories can neither be true nor false. So if one person has a theory and the other person says that's false, well, they're actually wrong. It's neither true nor false. But you can't also call that person a liar. You just have to basically say, I disagree with your interpretation of. But when we call somebody a liar, sorry, I mean to interrupt. The chair was sleeping and I tripped over it. Chairs sleep? It's a theory about what chairs are doing the whole time they're sitting there, but it's neither true nor false. How many people are Harry Potter fans? The same people that were familiar with C.S. Lewis. That's interesting. Is Harry Potter a wizard? Does Harry Potter exist?
Technically, he's
Technically, he is a warlock, which would be a wizard, I suppose. Yeah, that's like cup and thermos, right? we could get into a discussion about what that means. By the way, one of the things we could do today is go to did I spell wizard correctly? This is ChatGPT. How many of you have used it already? Or other variations? The same people that like C.S. Lewis. This is interesting. So yes, you can ask ChatGPT. It used to be the Google. We would Google everything, but then you have to figure out what Google is telling you. Now you could ask ChatGPT, and it puts the internet sources together that it has available and basically figures out which word should follow this word, and then this word should follow this word, and this word should follow this word. And you end up getting something that seems like intelligent responses in regard to those questions. What does it say? In the series, Harry discovers he's a wizard. Okay. The problem, of course, is wizards don't really exist. Is this right? We can argue over that. I'm sure there are some folks out there that think they're real wizards. And I don't mean the sports team. It's a basketball team, right? Yeah, isn't this fun? This is like fun stuff. I haven't even started filling out what the syllabus is all about. Well, you get the idea. Within a particular context of the book series and the movies and the fan things that they do, right? Harry is clearly a wizard, and if you say he's not, you're wrong. He's a thumping good one, as a matter of fact, right? But if you're going to be scientific about it, it's a character in a fictional series, right? And so, of course, what we have is, it's true within a particular context, but in another context it's false. So we actually have statements that are true and false, but not at the same time, because of course they're true and false in different contexts. So it's complex. It's complex to talk about it. Okay, well, let me get back to what we're supposed to be doing. What are we supposed to be doing? It's totally up to me, right? Now, I have a contract with you. The syllabus is the contract, and this part, the theme, is decided by committee, which is why it seems to be a bunch of nonsense. It's kind of like ChatGPT wrote it. Right? Introduces works of influential thinkers. Ooh, who are those? Both ancient and modern. In the Western philosophical tradition, we have had so many arguments over that, because currently Western, air quotes, or what do you want to call them? Air quotes, right? That means I'm using the word Western in a nuanced sense, because there are so many different arguments over what Western is, whether it's good for us, whether it's evil, or what, right? So we've argued over this and wanted to introduce other things besides so-called Western tradition. I would argue that the Western tradition does not include the Greeks. There are many sources out there that will say, yes, the Greeks are Western. There was no such thing at the time of the Greeks. The so-called Western tradition, I think, began, if you want to argue this, with Descartes. So it's a modern philosophical tradition. And what we're actually studying when we're studying the Western philosophical tradition is not necessarily philosophers that are from the West, but the tradition that developed philosophically in the West. So the Western philosophical tradition looks at quite a lot of other philosophies. It's just that we have a particular tradition that's part of our academic culture in the West. Does that make sense? Notice that, by the way, I'm not in agreement with everybody. That's a particular point of view. Okay. And we're going to emphasize central problems of knowledge, epistemology, reality, which is metaphysics. Metaphysics is a Greek word, 2 words. Meta means that which follows, basically. It's also a company today. Right? I'm having as much fun as I am. And physics is physica, which meant nature. And where did the word come from? It came from people putting Aristotle's works together, and they finished putting together the book that became known as Physics, the Physics, or Nature. And then they had this other book, which is a collection of things after that, and they said, what should we call this? Let's call it the book that follows the physics. So it was called Metaphysica. And the topics that were in that book have been known as metaphysics ever since, at least in most modern European languages. If you go to Barnes & Noble's, the bookstore downtown, and you go to the metaphysics shelf, the things you see there are not what philosophy discusses in metaphysics. They're weird things like, crystals and other things that, are considered nonsense. Metaphysics is serious. In fact, we have a course called Metaphysics that people can take in preparation for graduate school, really. Good and evil, which would be considered ethics. So we'll talk about some ethics, as well as metaphysics and epistemology. And there's 2 other aspects of philosophy that are separate. For example, logic. Good reasoning is part of the 5 things that philosophy typically is considered to study. And then the other one is aesthetics, which is the theory of beauty. That's beautiful. We have our own aesthetics course. We have multiple ethics courses because we need them, including business ethics. So you're welcome to take other philosophy courses, of course. So those are what philosophy studies. We have student outcomes that have been worked over and over and over. This is also a committee agreement that students completing this course should be able to identify, comprehend, analyze, and evaluate complex philosophical arguments in oral and written discourse. They should also be able to understand, analyze, interpret, and apply major works in the areas of the history of philosophy, ethics, and contemporary topics. You could see a committee wrote that. Yes, it's, well, we gotta have this word in there. We gotta have this. No, I think we should have this word in. You get it. Right? And then that's how that comes out. But I'm held to that. That should work. So everybody that finishes this course should be able to do that. Notice I didn't list a textbook. With the way the internet works, it seems like it's just theft. Asking students, you have to buy this $180 textbook so that you'll have something to hold the door open, when you get home. Seems crazy. With everything that's on the web. The problem I have is, well, what things are important? I've been reading since 2 weeks before I was born. Because my womb was a womb with a view. And my mother read to me. I'm sure. You get that. That's funny. Nobody's laughing. Nobody's liking my jokes. What the heck? Better check and make sure my laugh application is updated. Maybe that's what's wrong. No. So what should you read? How many people read? More than the C.S. Lewis fans. That's good. Okay. We've had all sorts of interesting discussions. I had a student once, and I showed a lecture. It was about half an hour long by Jared Diamond, who had written a book called Collapse, which was about 10 different societies that had collapsed. And why they collapsed, for example, historically. And the lecture was so interesting that the one student said, I want to read that book. And by the next class, he had gotten a copy of the book and started to read it. And he looked at me and he said, seriously, how do you read a book? Because he had gotten to about 2.5 pages in, and he just hit like a wall of it. His attention span couldn't continue reading an 800-page book. And it suddenly occurred to him that he could read, but he had not practiced reading complicated texts like that his whole life. And he was not like a brand new kid or anything. He was really an adult. And here he is for the first time reading a complex text, and discovered that just because he could read didn't give him the ability to read something like that. And I think the answer is, well, you have to start off when you're young. You have to have parents that read things to you like Big B, Big Brown Bear, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, Beautiful Baboon, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, Beautiful Baboon, Blowing Bubbles, Bump Black Bugs, Banana Boxes, etc. How many folks are familiar with that one? Okay. My kids all are, which is why I pretty much have memorized, it gets all the way until, and that's what broke Baby Bird's balloon. It's called the Bee Book. It's kind of like a Zeus thing, right? And that's the kind of book you start off reading a child, and then eventually my granddaughter's 4, and my son thinks that she'll be able to read by this year, because she's already been working on all kinds of books, from writing, things of that sort. 4 years old, is it about right time to start learning Greek? Maybe not. But you get the idea. You need to start reading when you're a child and gradually move up to harder and harder books, right? When J.K. Rowling first had published